Let's get more now on the issue over the Tory donor and that £10 million, and specifically the comments that were made to Diane Abbott about Diane Abbott. Because joining us now is Weyman Bennett from Stand Up to Racism, a charity that Diane Abbott is involved with. Weyman, first of all, I suppose the biggest question here is what Rishi Sunak was trying to say, which was the donor has apologised. We need to sometimes be able to move on and forgive people when they have done wrong. Is it possible to forgive someone if they've said something racist in the past?
It's possible if they actually show any form of forgiveness. But what we've had is subterfuge and cover-up. To her credit, Bad Enoch from the Conservative Party said it was an open racist statement. I don't believe that racists should get the chance to self-define if they're not racist. It's not up to them to decide after they've made their racist statement whether it's acceptable for the rest of people to accept that. Large amounts of the black community and many communities in this country are abhorred by the level of gutter politics that is coming out at the moment in terms of scapegoating and misdirection in order for people not to deal with real politics. I think it was misogyny. I think it was racism. And to be honest with you, I'm not surprised that they're not going to give back the money. I think that most of the parties have jumped into the gutter over the question of racism, asylum and refugees, in terms of it's easier to blame those people than deal with the problems that have existed for the last 14 years. Blame a minority. It's an old policy.
Well, I mean, you can't necessarily conflate getting tough on asylum and illegal migration with racist comments, Weyman. But have you spoken to Diane Abbott about how she's feeling?
I've sent messages of solidarity to Diane, but I do. One of our meetings, which we planned to do in Hackney, unfortunately had to be cancelled because the level of threats. It's not just that their words. These words are carried up with the threat of racist attacks. And I'm sorry, we live still in a country in which a minority of people take it upon themselves to racially abuse people simply because of the melanin content of their skin. And the level of denial that exists at the highest points of government about dealing with these problems and being honest about it, I think it could be if people set themselves some standards of rejecting racism and not using it as a political football in order to gather the racist vote, which is important for some political parties, I'm sure. But I do think it's something that we have to reject. And I don't believe that it's really been seriously tackled. I don't believe the racism inside the Conservative Party has been tackled. I don't believe it's been tackled by other fringe parties like Reform or anything like that. I think that racism, particularly anti-black racism and Islamophobia, has become a staple diet of British politics, and it's something which we intend to challenge. I believe the overwhelming majority of people in this country reject racism, and the attempt to try and galvanise it as a political machine shows the bankruptcy of political parties because they can't gather people together unless they use forms of reaction.
Weyman, I think it's so important that you mentioned how some people want to downplay or deny racism in society. It's something that pervades all parties, not least, of course, the Labour Party, because it was Diane Abbott herself who was suspended as a Labour MP when she said that Jewish people don't face racism. She said that Jewish people face discrimination in the same way that ginger people face discrimination. She's still suspended as a Labour MP for that comment. So I suppose this cuts all sorts of ways.
Look, we're very clear as an organisation, and that includes Diane, that we oppose anti-Semitism, Islamophobia and anti-racism. For us, it's not an Olympics of which group is more oppressed than the other. We reject all of them. And what I would expect is that if anybody made an anti-Semitic statement, made a racist statement, an Islamophobic statement, that they're challenged equally. But what we're having is an unequal status given to people dependent upon what people believe will be the political outcome if they use those different forms of racism.
Yes, I guess the problem is a lot of people
thought...
A lot of people did think it was anti-Semitic of Diane Abbott to downplay anti-Semitism as a discrimination against redheads. I mean, that was a ridiculous comment that lots of people found deeply offensive.
I think if people have listened to Diane's apology, right, what Diane said was that when you walk into a room as a black person, you're immediately identified as a black person. But you might be able to walk into a room if you're white. And my white Jewish friends tell me this, yeah? They come back and tell me that person's racist. They've said something racist about you, Weyman, right? But they have not been identified. They don't realise that that person's Jewish and would find anti-black racism as well as anti-Semitism offensive. And so what I think is one of the things which we're trying to develop is an understanding about how racism works in British society. And we want to reject all forms of racism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and anti-black racism.
Okay.
I want to make that clear.
We're going to have to leave it there, but thank you very much indeed for your time. Weyman Bennett, who is from Stand Up to Racism, great to speak to you. Thank you.
No, particularly interesting to get Weyman's perspective because, of course, Diane Abbott, very involved with that charity.
In that organisation.
Yeah. Although it is now 326 days since Diane Abbott was suspended from the Labour Party for her comments about Jewish people. I do find it extraordinary. There's supposedly this investigation into her comments, into her letter to a newspaper, to The Guardian. We haven't seen the conclusion of that investigation. It's been almost a year that she's been suspended. Have the Labour Party actually been investigating? And if they have been, why has it taken the best part of a year with still no answer?
Well, that's a very good question.